Hello, and welcome to The Connection. This podcast is about understanding and building the connection we have with others and with ourselves. I hope that through this podcast, you will be able to have more joy and fulfillment in your life. I'm your host, Jared Hurst. So last week, I spoke with you a little bit about finding your energizers, about finding your passion and your direction in life. I wanted to take that and tell you a little bit about how you can use those things in order to design your life. But I had something happen in the last little while, and it made me want to talk about a separate topic first. I'm going to touch on this other topic, and then I'll get back to designing your life in a later episode. Whether you are aware of this or not, there was this meme. And that was this idea that if you were a woman, would you rather be alone in a forest with a man or with a bear? Now, this podcast is not meant to dissect that. I am going to talk about it, but a lot of what I want to talk about in this episode is talking about understanding other people's perspectives and how this experience actually influenced my life and has changed my life in a better way. I'm going to really quickly kind of detail out some of what has happened and some perspectives from different sides. So bear with me. I'm simply trying to represent both sides of this perspective. And I'm also going to give a little bit about what my perspective was and then how my perspective changed through this experience. So this started coming up. I wasn't that concerned about it, but eventually I saw a bunch of men that were upset. They looked at it from the standpoint that there are bad men in the world, but they felt unfairly judged because they were being held accountable for the actions of those bad men. I can understand that. As a man, it was at times it felt, I guess, upsetting. I don't know if upsetting is the right word, but you feel defensive because you feel like you're being held accountable for something that's beyond your control. And I don't know how most people look at the world, but I want to believe that the majority of humanity is good. And I believe that the majority of men are good. I think there are issues in the world where men have not been taught how to do certain things. I think there's issues where women haven't been taught how to do certain things. I think there's issues with the way men and women are, the way that we receive information from the media, from marketing, from all these different avenues. I think there's a lot of ways that both men and women can grow as individuals, as sub-classifications of the human race, right? We're all human, but then we have the men group and we have the women group, and I think both groups have their own strengths and weaknesses and things that they can work on. And I definitely understand there is no question that there are bad men in the world. No doubt. I have spent much time talking to my daughters, trying to make sure that they understand how to be safe and how to look out for themselves and all those things. There's obviously a threat there. There's no question that there's a threat there. At the same time, I could understand why some men were feeling attacked. So I made this post. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. I saw a post from a friend, and she was saying that men were missing the point of the conversation. And I've talked before on this podcast that I really believe that awareness is a key to creating the life that we desire. We have the ability to decide how we are going to react to things. A lot of us live life on autopilot. We have this program that is running, and then we react based off of that programming. But when we become aware of things and we become conscious of things, we have the opportunity to choose our reactions and override that programming that we have from our lifetime, from our childhood. Well, one of the things that's really important about awareness is understanding perspective and understanding the way things affect us. I feel like the more I understand about psychology, the more I understand about trauma, the more I understand about beliefs and identity and all these things that influence the way that we perceive and view the world, the more I can see how other people are being influenced by those factors. And so I want to understand other people's perspectives, because when I understand other people's perspectives, then it gives me insight into how I can help them, and it also helps me to grow as a person. So when she said this and she said men are missing the point, I was like, you know what? Let's look at that. Because I think as a man, as a logical man, and if you're a woman, you might be rolling your eyes right now. But men tend to be really logical, right? Like when we talk with women, a lot of the times we try to problem solve. We try and fix things. And women have a different sense of emotion and caring and nurturing and all these things that are also amazing. And so as a logical man, and you hear, I would rather be alone in the forest with a bear over a man, you're like, really? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to have this big scary bear? Most men are good people, etc. And we see this surface level logical thing and we don't get it. And I think what happens is I started looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, what is the message behind the message? I think the message behind the message is that women feel unsafe. Women feel like men are threats, and that there are lots of things that men are doing that are putting women at risk, and that collectively as a society, we need to do more to change the things that are happening. I think that's the message. I believe that's the message that women are trying to say, is that there needs to be change, and that there needs to be safety, and that this is an issue, and this is a problem. And I totally get that. It's really easy to try and empathize with something that somebody else is doing, but it's really hard to empathize when you are merely observing somebody else's perspective and life instead of experiencing it yourself. As a man, we very rarely feel physically threatened. We're very rarely having to even consciously think about the threats that could be there physically. It's only when, a man gets up in your face, or you're alone in the woods with animals that are dangerous, or up on a cliff, or doing some type of adrenaline type activity, that as a man you even really think about your physical well-being. A lot of the times we just go and we act and we do and whatever. You even see it in little boys. They just go out and, whatever, we're going to get hurt. Anyway, we just have a different perspective and way of looking at it. So I decided I wanted to make a post. I wanted to make a post where I helped call them into action, where I helped them see we need, as collective, to take individual accountability, where we address women's safety, where we address sexual assault, where we address all these things that are affecting women from a physical safety perspective. We need to learn from what we're seeing in this social media post and this trend. And at the same time, I wanted to show my support for men and help women maybe see why the men were reacting the way they were, why men were feeling attacked. Because it's easy to get defensive when a portion of who we are is being attacked. If our religion is being attacked, then we get defensive. If our political party is being attacked, then we get defensive. If our sex is being attacked, then we get defensive. If our sexual orientation is being attacked, we get defensive. Any subset or classification that's part of our identity, if that portion of our identity gets attacked, then we get in defensive mode, because that's just how we are as human beings. We try to defend and protect our identity because our identity is who we are. So we feel attacked, right? And so I was trying to relay that message. I feel that my first video that I released on this, I feel like it was good, but I started seeing posts from women I got messages individually from both men and women, and it made me realize that on some level, it still hadn't sunk in deep enough, and that I needed to have more curiosity. I needed more curiosity in my life. I needed to try and understand people in a better way before I started speaking. And also, I realized that whenever you're talking about a sensitive topic, you need to do a better job of validating the person that feels attacked before you give your own perspective. And I think there was women that they saw my post and they appreciated what I had to say, but I don't think I did a good enough job of validating their experience and showing that I really understood what they were going through, or at least that I was trying to understand what they were going through, before I also tried to share the perspective of the men. So that is something that I learned out of all this and I think this is true whenever you're in a disagreement with somebody, with a spouse, a friend, a coworker, whatever it might be. It's really important that we show the other person that they are both seen and heard before we offer our perspective of the situation. Because if we don't, it can sound like we are ignoring what they're having to say, that we're saying that their points of view are invalid and that our points of view are valid, and we turn it into an argument instead of a collaboration. They say that the best negotiators turn situations into a collaboration. It is a mutual win. And so I realized that I didn't do a good job of that. As I started listening to these people, it was just really interesting to look at a woman's perspective. I remember I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. There's a woman by the name of Alison Armstrong. She's written a number of books on relationships, and one of the books she wrote is In Sync with the Opposite Sex. I love it. It's a great book. If you're in a relationship, I highly recommend reading it. In there, she is in a seminar at one point, and she has the members of the audience raise their hand based on when they last felt safe. Or not safe, in danger. And what was fascinating is that the majority of the women had felt unsafe within the last day or couple days. And the majority of the men hadn't felt unsafe, more than maybe once or twice in the month. And so I already knew that women have this different perspective around threat than men do. But I guess it's really easy, like I said earlier, when you're not living something, to lose sight of it. It's only when you're consciously thinking about it that it really sinks in. And so when I heard women talk about this, I'm like, wow, this really is an issue. This really is a problem. If there's this many women that feel threatened and unsafe and are constantly on guard, I don't want that. I have 2 daughters. The last thing I want is for them to have to carry pepper spray and to have to be careful what time they go out at night. I tell them those things. I'm like, well, if it's late at night, have somebody walk you to your car that you trust. Just because this boy is a really nice guy doesn't mean that he's always a good person. He may be putting on a show, or he might do something wrong. And so I'm constantly watching out for their well-being because I understand that there is a potential of a threat there. But it's really easy to lose sight of that. So here's the thing that I really learned from all this. And I thought to myself, the only real way for men to start making a difference is to, 1, take personal accountability, to talk to the women in their life and ask them what makes them feel unsafe. Because during the course of this, I realized that there was women that were telling me stories, because I was having some really great conversations. I was hearing stories of women talking about when they felt unsafe. I realized that I never would have considered that those actions could make a woman feel unsafe. So for instance, this one woman was telling me about how she was walking down a trail alone and there was a group of men coming along. They spread out when they came to her and just started having a conversation. But because of the way they kind of formed like a half circle around her, it made her feel threatened. She felt surrounded. And I'm like, wow, I never really thought about how my body positioning could make a woman feel trapped. This is something I need to be aware of. This is why it's so important to understand other people's perspectives, because our reality is our perspective. And until we understand other perspectives and other realities, there's things that we don't realize. There's things that are affecting our life and our interactions. This, to me, is one of the biggest problems in the world right now. There is so much division. There is so much attack around different identities. There is so much defensiveness. There is so much division. And there needs to be more civil discourse. There needs to be more understanding and learning how to have difficult conversations with each other so that we can not necessarily change each other's minds. Sometimes I think it's important to have an open mind, but I also think it's important just to understand what other people are experiencing. So I decided I was going to do this with my daughter. I was taking my daughter to a party, and I asked her, I told her a little bit about what's going on. I told her about my video, and I said, can you tell me a little bit about what makes you feel unsafe? I want to understand what this is like for you. And this was so enlightening. She told me a lot of things, but two things really stood out to me. She said, anger is really scary to me because when a man is angry, I'm worried that that's going to lead to actions that could hurt me. And that made me pause. And I was like, wow, I'd never really thought about that. See, when a man is angry with me, I feel like he's upset, he's passionate, he's being defensive, but I don't think of it in any way as a physical threat. And it made me think about my marriage, how when I would try to discipline children, I would raise my voice and I would become very authoritative and I would be upset. In my mind, when I was raising my voice, when I was getting upset, when I was being authoritative, that's what I was doing, is I was laying down the law. I was demanding respect and requiring my children to understand that there is a certain level of respect that they need to show to their parents, and that there is a certain level of following the rules and certain behaviors are not allowed. And then my ex-wife would tell me that I needed to be softer, that I needed to get down on their level, and I didn't understand it. Like, I understood it was something that she wanted, but it felt like we were in conflict with each other. It felt like she was looking at discipline of the children in this very nurturing, loving way, which I get. And so I tried to add that into my process. But at the same time, I felt she needed to understand part of my process and where we needed to show that we were in charge and we needed to demand a certain level of respect from our children. But what I didn't get is how, as a woman, she might interpret my anger and my volume as a threat. I am a very loud individual. When I get passionate, my volume knob switches without me even realizing it. If you've ever been around me, if I am happy and excited, I get loud. If I am upset, I get loud. Like, I just get loud whenever I'm feeling like a really energetic emotion. And I've had people tell me here and there to turn it down or to be quiet. I didn't realize how that could create anxiety for them. How that could create a level of, I need to be on guard. I need to be in a defensive mode. And I didn't realize how that could come across in the way that I was viewed as a parent, how maybe my girls might even be viewing me, how I might be coming across as scary. Here I'm thinking I'm coming across as being authoritative and a leader, and I'm actually coming across as something that's scary. My daughters, after my divorce, I remember at one point my daughter told me that I was scary, and I didn't understand it. I was like, what do you mean? I love you and I care about you, and I do all these wonderful things with you, and how could you possibly think of me as scary? I didn't realize how my actions were affecting her perception of me. I didn't understand. And I don't want this to come across like I'm this big, evil, mean man. Like, I'm not like constantly yelling. I'm not abusive. I'm not like, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But that is why this stood out to me this week, is I got to have a conversation with my daughter, and I got to ask her the world from her reality. And I got to see some Facebook posts, and I got to see the world from women's reality. And then I got to have dialogue, and that got to help me have an understanding even more of their reality. And that's what I want to take away from this, is as people, if we spend more time in our curiosity, more time trying to understand other people's responses, words, actions. When somebody yells at you or snaps or cries or says something, it's not just about the message. It's about trying to understand the message behind the message. It's about trying to understand the reality behind the message. I think that's true empathy, is when we really seek to understand other people. When we really try and put ourselves in their shoes and understand their world, I think it opens up so much more for us to connect with one another. It creates a space of safety. And in safety, that's when collaboration can thrive. So I hope that you can learn from this experience like I have, that it'll be something you can take into your personal life and add some richness to your world, to your experiences with other people. Really appreciate you tuning in this week, giving me an opportunity to share and kind of digress a little bit, talk about this topic. We'll definitely get around to talking with you a little bit about creating our life, basically the experiences that we really desire to have. A life that is more rich and fulfilling. That's something that I'm definitely working towards. I'm not saying I have everything figured out, but I have some things that I've figured out that I think will be of benefit to you. So I'm excited to talk with you about that. And until next week, remember that you are not alone.